So, you've decided to get a Yamaha AV receiver. I'm going to pretty much just read off something that I typed up because maybe it's easier for you to watch a video or listen to a video than it is to just read something that you've got in front of you. Um, there are five ones that I've selected. Uh, I'm not selecting more than that because Yamaha's lower end stuff has like five channels, and pretty much seven has been, uh, seven channels have been out since at least like 2005 for AV receivers. I guess you could go up more than that, but I don't really know how many movies actually support that. I know a lot of games do, but I don't really have the kind of room that would support that many speakers. So to start out with, I'm going to go highest to lowest end. And again, the bottom end is going to be the A6V or the V6A, just because it's got seven channels, and the one below that only has five. First one is the Yamaha not Advantage, it's Avantage. The RX A8A. It's $3,549.95 if you buy it directly from Yamaha. So, what you get, I'm going to be talking about the differences, not necessarily what you do get, but what you don't get as you go down, the chain of Yamaha AV receivers. Because, like, okay, if you're already getting something, why is it that big of a deal? If all of the ones in this lineup have it. So I'm not going to bother mentioning it. That will come into play when I start doing a video on Yamaha versus like Onkyo, Marantz, Denon, and Sony. So I've got a lot to go through, but I've already typed up, a couple pages worth of material, so I'm going to go through that first. So what you get if you go with the A8A over the A6A are two extra channels. You get 11.2 instead of 9.2. That's 11 channels plus two for subwoofers, 11 speaker channels plus two for the subwoofers. So you have stereo subwoofers. You get two of the ES9026 Pro DACs instead of one ES9026 Pro and one ES9007S like the A6A has. And that's it. That is literally all you get for an extra $1,100. Yamaha doesn't quantify what the difference is between those DACs and their marketing materials. Just that having two Pro DACs is considered ultimate. So they don't say what the sound difference is, just that it's there. No graphs or anything comparing the two. I'm sure that other people out there have done that, making the comparison between those two. I'm only going off the comparison chart that's on Yamaha's website. Most of the stuff that I watch is like YouTube videos and DVDs and 1080p, Blu-rays and stuff. I don't really watch 4Ks that much. I don't listen to DVD audio. I don't even listen to music that much. So for me, in my use case, that wouldn't make a difference and it wouldn't be valuable to me. To people who do listen to a lot of music, I'm sure that they can, tell the difference between those two because they're listening to a lot of music all the time, and they, have higher standards for that. Although, if those people are looking for audio, like better audio, they're probably going to be going with like these $10,000 plus, receiver separates rather than something that's, a AV receiver, for video plus audio. Even at the highest possible end of Yamaha receivers, the HDMI pass-through maxes out at 40 gigabits per second instead of 48 gigabits per second. And the 48 gigabits per second specification has been part of the HDMI specification since 2017. It's been 6 years, and they still haven't figured out, oh, maybe I'm supposed to have this thing that meets that specification from 6 years ago. So Yamaha is not at the leading edge of consumer retail or consumer technology. Or just I if you're going to be watching 8K, you're going to just have to go with a completely different brand, because you don't get uncompressed 8K um, at 60 FPS with the Yamaha receiver. It could be that you're lowering your frame rate down to where you would be able to watch uncompressed 8K. But for me, that's like I don't know what percentage that would be. It would be like 5-6 or something of a percent. Difference between those two. So yeah, it's significant in terms of the actual data cap, but in terms of the results that you're getting, I guess it depends on your use case. If you're just watching 4K uncompressed, it's probably going to be fine. None of the AV receivers in their current lineup have S video. They don't have a TV tuner or the coax connector that you would use to watch analog TV. I think you can still use the in like an actual dedicated TV. I'm not talking about the receiver. Those things have the coax connector on them to where you can connect an antenna and watch digital TV, because you're receiving the boosted signal or the received signal from the antenna. If you just have a coax port on your TV and you don't have an antenna attached to it, you're not going to get any signal from stations. You need that copper to be receiving the signal. It does have a coax connector. I think all of them do have FM radio coax connectors for FM antennas, and I think all of them have AM antennas, but I don't listen to radio really. It does make sense to me to listen to radio when you have digital and stuff, and are having to deal with the limitations of bandwidth, and quality from FM radio. I mean, maybe if somebody's like a radio and like ham radio person, they just want one more device out of their like whole rack of stuff that they want to use to listen to radio. I can't really see myself using it in my based on my habits. The highest end ones have one set of component inputs and two sets of composite inputs for video. Most of them, I think all of them do have RCA connectors, like for analog audio, but they don't have the video port, which means if you've got old consoles or a VHS player, any other old device, maybe a camera or something, you're not going to be able to use it with the newest brand newest thing. Maybe if your intent is to capture and digitize your material, you're going to be going a different route, like maybe with a capture card or something. So it's not terribly useful. If you've got an older TV, it's going to have those anyway. So just maybe use your older TV. And I'm talking not really super old, just maybe within the last 10 years, there's still TVs that have those inputs on them. I think there could be still some TVs that are coming out that have those ports. Just not the case with this. Not the case with all of their AV receivers. But the A8A does have those component inputs. It's got the YBR, those channels. So that's the main differences between the A8A and the A6A. Going down to the $2,449.95 A6A, RX A6A, you get two more channels. So you got 9.2 versus the A4A's 7.2. You get 40 watts more you get 40 watts more power per channel when driven in pairs. And you get one of the ES9026 Pro DACs and an ES9007S, whereas the A4A only has one ES9007S and no Pro at all. So it's just got one chip instead of two, like the A6A and the A8A have. If you do go down to the A4A, you completely lose analog HDMI up conversion. That's not to be confused with upscaling. That's up conversion. So the reason why, if you can guess, is because it doesn't have those component or composite inputs. So you can't up convert something that doesn't have the connectors to be up converted to something else. You can upscale lower resolution material to 4K or 8K, but you can't do that if you don't have the stinking inputs. The A48 has no component in or out, no composite in or out, and just like the higher end models, it doesn't have S-video. If you look at the A6A and A8A, you'll notice that the component video and audio inputs, I need to change that to audio because I said video and video inputs, they can be up converted from 480i to 8K. I'm curious to see what that would look like. I think you can do that with software. I don't think it has to be natively done with a TV that supports that. If you've got a computer and Cyberlink or some kind of maybe even VLC could do it. I don't know. There might be like some kind of extension or something you could do that with, or a plugin. But with this, at least, you don't have to do that. You can just have a DVD player or a VHS player or a Laserdisc player. Not a Laserdisc player, because those probably use S-video. Maybe if you had a S-video to component or some kind of converter. I don't know if you can even do that with that kind of signal. Doesn't matter because I don't have one of those. Maybe it does matter to you and you're going to have to look into it yourself. So that's an interesting thing. You're going from interlaced to progressive and from 480 to like the ridiculous resolution that is 8K. All right, moving on. If you go down to the A4A, you lose both of the two pairs of XLR jacks. The input XLRs and pre-out XLRs that go to external amps, you won't be getting either of those. Going from the A64A to the A4A, I wish they'd call these something different, like IKEA does, and name them each something different. You don't have the XLRs on the A4A. So if you have a nice big speaker setup, the big tower speakers, and they use those, you won't be getting those. You can't use a preamp, or you can't use an external amp. The preamp is already in the AV receiver. That's where your preamp is. So you're going to have to spend the $2,500 or $2,449.95 if you want to get the XLRs. Going from the A6A to A4A, I need to slow down. Going from the A6A to the A4A, you lose one of the digital audio inputs, but I can't see why you'd be using two of those at once unless maybe you have two consoles connected and you don't want to disconnect and reconnect those. Is that really worth like the $1,200 difference so you don't have to get up and doot? Like, I'm sure you'll spend more seconds picking out, something at the restaurant than you would doing that. Maybe if you're super old or if you have kids or something and you don't want to messing with it, I could maybe see why the $1,200 would be worth it, because you don't want to lose the entire thing, because they're not knowing what they're doing. Maybe they're trying to plug an S-video connector into digital audio optical input. This is empty. Going down to the A4A, you're down to one digital audio coax input. You lose 2 analog audio pairs. The A6A and A8A have an extra pre-out that's powered and an extra HDMI zone, and the A4A doesn't have that. The A4A doesn't have Zone B output or a Zone GUI. But I don't know how zones work, and I don't want to know right now. Maybe someday there'll be a situation where I'd actually want it, but it's just my room. Maybe if I want to somehow drill through the floor and the walls to go to, the living room, and have a whole second set of speakers and just want to have one AV receiver, I can maybe see how that's possible. Or would maybe be something that I'd want, because I don't want to buy 2 $2,400 AV receivers. But it's got a second zone anyway. The A4A has an extra zone you can use, so that's still not impossible. It's just you don't have 3 or 4 zones. No, you do have 3. You do have. I think you do. I'll get back to it. It just doesn't have Zone B output, and it doesn't have a Zone GUI. It does have a web page, an IP configuration page where you can control stuff through there. So you still can control it from your other location, because it's got a extender for putting an IR receiver downstairs, but it's also got Bluetooth, so you don't really need a remote control, because you can control it from your phone or from the web page, if you're using a laptop. So all these things are really heavy. Make sure you're not putting it on like a TV tray or something. Like, actually have a cabinet or a sturdy table. I probably wouldn't put it on like a card table. These things are the size of a mini fridge, practically. At least they weigh that much. The A6A does have some video adjustment features that the A4A does not. You can adjust video details, edges, brightness, contrast, and saturation on a per HDMI port basis, as far as I can tell. That's the qualifier there. I don't know how you would go about confirming that. Maybe just ask somebody who's already got one. The manual definitely says that the A4A doesn't have those features. But like your TV does have them, so just adjust your TV. You're probably going to want more control doing that anyway. Maybe if you needed something that's like a offset for the settings on the TV, maybe it would be easier for you to have one device that you can do that all through that one device, rather than having it spread out through different devices, and you have to get familiarity with more than one device. I can't see the point of that. The A4A loses 4 of its pre-out channels and goes down to 7.2. So we already covered that. The A4A doesn't support RAW 3D, but then again, not many movies are available for that anyway. I'm sure there's some websites that list support for it. It's probably more prevalent in the European market. I think because it was done by a German company, but American movies have been made using RO 3D, or Oro, because it's like Aural. It's probably Aural. RO 3D. Going down from the RX A4A to the A2A, you get 10 fewer watts power per channel when driven in pairs. The A2A is $1,000. Even though the comparison chart says the A2A doesn't have Cinema DSP HD3 support, the manual says it does, so just ignore the comparison chart for that feature. The A2A doesn't have the following programs, but I assume you could just adjust the settings in one of the pre-existing programs to get the same effect. This pertains to Cinema DSP. It doesn't have Hall in Amsterdam, Church in Freiburg, Church in Royamont, Village Vanguard, Warehouse Loft, Recital Opera, and Enhanced. Those last two, Recital Opera and Enhanced, are really the only ones where I could see that maybe there's something special about them, but I still think you can. I still think it's probably a good bet that you could emulate those with, the A2A and just adjust the settings to where it sounds pretty good. Maybe you can even just download, adjust the firmware or something, or replace the firmware. Maybe it'd make it more flaky, I guess, if that's worth it to you, but usually I don't even know how to adjust the sound settings that I do have. So for me, it wouldn't be worth it. Maybe it is for you. Although, if you're already familiar with this kind of stuff, I don't know why you'd be watching this video, because you've probably already are well read enough that you'd already know about it. The comparison chart says the A2A doesn't have the high resolution music enhancer, but neither do any of the other ones. That feature isn't mentioned anywhere in any of the manuals. There's a high precision EQ calculator in another feature. So maybe that feature got confused with the compressed music enhancer. That does have a compressed music enhancer. All the ones I'm mentioning do. Just, this feature doesn't exist. Maybe it was called, high resolution music enhancer earlier on, in the marketing, and then they switched to compressed because of marketing reasons. It's kind of an artifact as far as I can tell right now, though. It's either a misprint or something got confused, but their marketing, their materials aren't consistent in describing this feature. The A4A and higher have a version of YPAO, which is a microphone and analytic program that does room acoustic correction that the A2A doesn't have, called 3D and 64-bit high precision EQ. Really, even without the microphone, I think you can just adjust your own speakers. This might be quicker and easier and more fine-grained, but I think if you're just casually watching movies, it's good enough. That, and a lot of movies just don't really have that good sound quality, especially if you're watching classic movies that just have mono audio. Just probably for the longest time, movies just had mono and didn't have stereo. And then they just got stereo, and the audio quality still sounded not great because of low dynamic range. Just limitations of the engineering and stuff at that time. You still got stuff like Bing Crosby and the Beatles, that actually cared about that, but just so much stuff not technologically advanced or just not the best engineering going into it. So it really just does, audio quality just doesn't matter. You can try really hard and spend a lot of money trying to get it, but it really depends on what kind of music you like. And if you're listening to the same songs over and over and over again, I get tired of stuff easily. I don't really like repetition, so I'm not really able to care that much about an individual song sounding good. Like, they'll all sound as good as they can get, but you reach a certain plateau and you just can't get above it, despite how good your equipment is. Just because the masters or the copies available just aren't that good, or the music just kind of sucks. Um, you know, it's like, all right, so this is what's available, huh? This is the great music that I was really wanting to get to hear. That's better than hearing it live. This is really disappointing. Yeah, reproduction's great. It's just not that great of a song, and doesn't really make my life that much better listening to it. All right. The A2A doesn't have a Hyperstream DAC at all. It has a Burr Brown PCM 5102A. And the marketing doesn't feel the need to acknowledge its existence. So it's apparently just, yeah, it's got a DAC. Have fun with it. The HDMI pass-through on the A2A drops down from the 40 gigabits per second on the higher-end ones all the way down to 24 gigabits per second. Keep in mind that before the 2.0 spec came out, it was limited to 18 gigabits per second. So you're barely getting 6 gigabits per second faster than that. So it's like, all right, this standard's been around since 2017. Again, limited to something that's like way years before then. Like, I don't know, 2012 or earlier. It's like, guys, get with the program. It's not that expensive of a component. We're talking like a few cents, to change out the thingy for the other thingy. Like, you're selling a $1,200, $1,300, or $1,000 player. Just get the better part. It doesn't take that much more engineering to do it. It's not any more labor intensive. It's maybe chip shortage, but no, just get the good stuff. Your whole thing depends on HDMI. It's an AV, V as in video, receiver. You want good video coming out of that thing. All right, so I might have misspoken earlier about the uncompressed AK. This is the one that has the limitation for uncompressed AK. They don't mention any kind of limitation with the 40 gigabits per second parts in the two higher end one, or the three higher end ones. This is where they do introduce that limitation. Although I still think the 40 gigabits per second is going to be a limitation, and they're just not saying it. Just not the whole truth. Not telling untruths, just not telling the whole truth. The A4A allows upscaling up to 8K, but the A2A only upscales to 4K. So if you're watching a DVD, unfortunately, you're only going to be able to scale it up to 4K instead of 8K. Which I don't know if the upscaling is even going to be that good. It's never going to be good as watching just native 8K material. Which, where is the 8K material? There's like a handful, like a very small handful of shows being made in 8K. Like, some British shows and stuff. The A4A has three HDMI audio. The A4A has three HDMI outputs. The A2A loses two of those. The A2A also loses one of the optical audio ports, and the pre-outs drop 5 channels down to 2.2. So just stereo plus subwoofers for your pre-outs. So like, you're talking front speakers, and the rest are just they're not going to have pre-outs. You don't really get to make good use of your external amp, although a lot of external amps are just going to be stereo anyway. And you might have a discrete subwoofer amp. The A's Zone 2 audio output loses HDMI support and is only available as a pre-out and no longer has zone video output at all. It loses one of the plus 12 volt trigger outputs for turning on a bunch of amps. Turning those on and off. Maybe you can only turn it on, but I'm pretty sure you can turn them off too. Actually, probably once they're on, you can turn them off with the remote control. So, it does have it's zone 2. Which means you can't use this thing in another room. So that's maybe a valuable feature that you would want to spend the extra $300 paying for. It's like, all right, I already spent $1,000 on an amp, $300 more for an amp that I can use in 2 rooms, which basically means I'm getting 2 amps for the price of 1. 2 amps for the price of 1.3 amps. So essentially you're saving $700 by doing that. So you'd have your source upstairs, like your DVD player or your Blu-ray player. You'd have that upstairs. It goes through the wires downstairs to your other room, right? So the video is coming directly from your source, maybe your computer. That cable's going down. You've still got, your whole setup upstairs, your full home theater setup. Downstairs, you don't have another receiver, but you do have speaker wires that are going all the way up from your receiver that's upstairs. So you've got a separate video cable that's coming from your source, down to downstairs. And all your audio cables, nope, still doesn't make sense. Because you'd have to have a whole second set of audio cables because you got your speakers upstairs and then you got your speakers downstairs. So how are you going to do that when you've only got half the number of audio outputs that you need? Like maybe if you have speakers that are going through your whole house, and they're not really stereo speakers, or maybe you've got sets of 2 speakers, like you got ceiling lights. It's probably useful for just music, but I can't see how it would be useful for watching movies and stuff in another room. Well, maybe if you don't want to duplicate no, it still doesn't make sense. Maybe if you disconnect all the wires from your speakers upstairs and reconnect all the ones from your speakers coming that are downstairs and do that every time you want to switch between a downstairs and an upstairs player, that would maybe be worth it. If you're just listening to music though, maybe I can see that as being the more common or more useful scenario. So I don't really care about zones, and I don't know why other people would. I'm sure, maybe someday somebody will explain it to me, but I don't care to look it up because it's not that important to me right now. All right. So the V6A is not in the A Vintage line. It is in the RXV line. So it's a whole nother tier. From the Vintage. The V6A is listed in the comparison chart as lacking Cinema DSP HD3 support, but the other marketing material, like if you look at the overview, it says it's there. If you look in the manual, it says it's there. The V6A loses surround AI, but who cares? Apparently it sucks anyway, and it's not really worth it. You're not really getting a better experience from that. Just trust the people who, actually did the audio mixing for the movie production. Trust them to do it instead. The V6A loses the fifth support cone, which you got 4 legs and then you got a fifth one in the middle of the player, you know, to reduce vibrations. But if that's the case, just stick a piece of rubber underneath there. Get like a tennis ball and cut that in half, like people do with like their walkers, stuff like the old people do. Or just get like a hockey puck and stick it in there. Just seriously, just get some styrofoam from the last, from your AV receiver and stick it under there. It's if it's that big of a deal. The V6A doesn't have jacks that allow the receiver to act as a bridge between a remote control in one room and an external device in another room. So, all that being said, the V6A, it's just an A2 but cheaper. So just get the V6A, right? You get 7.2, you get pretty much all the features you need, everything that I've listed so far. If you're just watching 4K stuff and audio isn't that important to you, just get the V6A. It's enough. You might even need you might even want the things that are below that if you don't really have a room that's big enough to warrant the 2 channels that you'd lose going down to 5 channels. Because you need a kind of bigger room to distinguish between where exactly sound is coming from. If you've got a smaller room, the super small room would be headphones, where you just need stereo, where you would just be getting stereo audio. So the smaller the room, the less you're able to tell where sound is coming from. So the fewer channels you'd need. So again, you don't need the component composite. You don't need those either because if you have old devices, you're probably going to have an old TV anyway to play those devices. Or if you're interested in capturing the stuff, you need a whole bunch of other equipment. You need like a capture card and like a time decoder and stuff. Just all kinds of other stuff that is not something that an AV receiver would be the best at anyway. So that is my review or summary. Review would be judging the quality of those players. This is an internal thing within the company, so this is an intra company comparison. Eventually maybe I'll do one for the other brands, but this is already like almost 40 minutes that I've spent trying to explain this to other people, but maybe I'll get views. I don't know. I'm done. Just get the V6A.